This video is a translated version of a Russian one. Dear friends, I am starting to make a series of videos about Lieutenant General of the Tank Forces, Nikolai Kirillovich Popel. He is known for being the brigade commissar of the 8th Mechanized Corps in 1941. He led a mobile group, organized a raid on the rear of the enemy on captured armored vehicles. This episode will be dedicated to his memories of the first hours of the war. As an addition to the main topic at the end of the video, I would like to briefly voice the moments of veterans' memories that are interesting from my point of view. This issue was made on the basis of the memories of Nikolai Kirillovich Popel himself, which were included in a book called In a Difficult Time. It is written in an accessible and easy language, and I highly recommend reading it to all history enthusiasts. Link to the source is, as always, in the description of the video. Called out on alarm, staff officers were taking their places at the tables. They all had suitcases with emergency supplies. These alarm suitcases included 2 sets of linen, razors, and a small supply of food. Bare minimum that allows you to go to war without going home again. The staff grumbled. The day was ruined. The plans that had been made with the family for the weekend were broken. Someone dispiritedly quipped, "The concert continues." "No," another objected. "This is the beginning of a sports festival, running with suitcases across rough terrain." Everything seemed normal. Neither Rabyshev nor I, nor even any of the staff assumed that this was a war. It may seem strange. The day before, I visited Muzichenko to confirm the correctness of our assumptions. Rabyshev withdrew part of his troops from the barracks to the staging area 3 days ago. And yet we didn't assume that the war was already beginning. We were well aware that all over the region there was intense reorganization of units, that the HQ of the district had already moved from Kiev to Ternopil 2 days ago. But between all these facts, between the confidence that the war with Hitler was inevitable, and the war itself as an advancing reality, there was an abyss. To some extent, this was due to the fact that our corps was not yet ready for battle. We had not completed the reorganization, and didn't have time to get new equipment completely. We were out of spare parts. At 4:30, the Chief of Staff of the Army, Varenikov, called, the one who gave his hand to cut off that there would be no war for another year. And he said that German troops were firing artillery along the entire border, shooting premature with direct fire, and in some places crossing the border. But he immediately warned, "Do not succumb to provocations. Do not open fire on German aircraft pieces. Wait for the order." And it was at this moment that a heavy, intermittent, hysterical rumble of motors reached our ears. Everyone ran out into the street. It had already dawned. June 22nd is the longest day, flashed through my mind. The planes turned over the city and went down. The crosses on the wings, known to us from the album Identification of Signs and Patterns, were visible to the naked eye. Black dots detaching from the aircraft were also visible. They bombed the railway station, the nearby roads, the oil refinery, and our barracks. Fascist intelligence didn't know that they had become empty 3 days before. After bombing, they slowly made a circle over the city. No one stopped them. The second wave of the enemy planes was inbound. This time, the center of the city, the part where the officers' families lived, had been bombarded. Rabyshev grabbed my hand. On the move, he told the operational duty officer to connect us with the anti-aircraft brigade. He closed the door to the office behind him and looked into my eyes. We'd known each other for over a year by that moment. Relations between us were determined by a short formula, soul to soul. I nodded. Rabyshev put his hand on the receiver, hesitated for a second, and gave the command, "Open fire on enemy planes." Shots of AA guns were added to the roar of bombs. Only then it became absolutely clear to us that the war had begun. The bombing did not last long. Our anti-aircraft artillery was apparently not to the taste of the German pilots. Then it turned out that although the anti-aircraft gunners did not shoot very well, they still shot down 4 aircraft pieces. Rabyshev and I went out into the corridor. Here stood the commanders and political workers of the Corps administration. They stood silent. Nobody was joking merrily about another nightly alarm that ruined Sunday afternoon. Concentrated, nervous, stern, they looked at us. They were waiting for our word. But we knew about it all as much as they did. We didn't even have orders. However, I felt that I must say at least a few words to them on behalf of the party in which they wholeheartedly believed. As soon as I finished my speech, the operational duty officer leaned towards me and whispered, "Your daughter called. She said a bomb had fallen not far from them." I explained that these were maneuvers. There was nothing left but to thank the captain for this naive and senseless lie. All of us were seized with anxiety for our families at that moment, and very soon the families showed up themselves. Old people, women, children were running along the morning streets. Being shrouded in dust and smoke of the recent bombing, they were barely dressed. Many were in nightgowns. Covered in blood, distraught from the unexpected bomb roar, they rushed to the headquarters. I hardly recognized Nadezhda Savelyevna Kristovskaya in the crowd. She was the wife of a military engineer of the third rank. At amateur performance evenings, she was so pretty in her dress to the floor. Now Nadezhda Savelyevna was disheveled. Her shirt was sticking out from under her dressing gown. In her arms there was a half-naked girl of 3 years old. I quietly asked, "Injured?" "Killed," she replied. The blood of women and children was the first blood I saw in that war. Help had to be organized immediately. I instructed senior battalion commissar Pogodin and senior political instructor Sorokin to take care of the officers' families. They decided to arrange a hostel in the house of the Red Army. We sent the wounded to the hospital, but each of these cases was so unusual for us. We ran into hundreds of unforeseen obstacles. It turned out that the hospital itself suffered from the bombing. Among the sick and the staff there were the wounded and the dead, and women kept coming up to the headquarters. Occasionally, one of the officers jumped out into the street. The connection of the HQ with the division and individual units was cut. We sent messengers, and it turned out that around and inside Dragobich, Nazi paratroopers dressed in Red Army uniforms were operating. Soon the head of the intelligence of the Corps, Major Oksin, reported that several such saboteurs had been caught. I asked, he said, what they know about our Corps. It turned out they know a lot. You can expect any provocation. People need to keep that in mind. I got used to listening to the words of Oksin, an experienced intelligence agent and a former St. Petersburg worker. In the meantime, soldiers restored the wire lines. Parts of the Corps were almost not affected by the bombing, but there were casualties among the officers' families. One of the women said the word evacuation. It was picked up by others. Many officers wouldn't mind sending their families away from the border zone. We understood those people, but we had neither right nor reason to agree with them. In addition, Rabyshev and I didn't have a firm conviction in the need for evacuation. Echelons with families could be bombed at the station and on the way. Here on the spot, we would undoubtedly establish anti-aircraft defense. Any minute now, who could even doubt it, our Hawks would appear. In 5 days, in a week, in an extreme case in 2 weeks, having repelled the attacks of the enemy, we ourselves would go on the offensive. Whoever accuses us of rosy cheerfulness would be unjust. We believed back then in our strength, in our weapons. Then I decided to go to the regional committee. I dropped home on the way. There was a crater right in front of the house. I ran to the second floor. The door was wide open. Lisa, the eldest daughter, ran out to meet me. Inside, my pale wife lay on the couch. She had troubles hearing and spoke with difficulty. She had a concussion. I made sure she was able to walk and sent her to the basement. Then I left Lisa in command. I walked through the rooms that had become so unfamiliar. Glass scrunched underfoot. The airwave tore out the window frames, and pieces of them lay on the floor. I went downstairs into the apartment of political workers Vakhrushev and Chipiga. I advised their families to also move to the basement. They asked if there would be an evacuation. I negatively shook my head. The head worked clearly, and thoughts returned to the other side of the Sun River all the time. There was no premonition. How many times have I heard about this special night later? The heart told, the soul felt. My heart and soul didn't tell me anything. It's just that I, like many other senior commanders of border formations, knew more facts that I could explain. There were heated arguments about the possible length of the war. A tankman said half a year. He was ridiculed for lacking faith. I listened to the disputes, tried to calm down the disputants, and spoke out my own thoughts. Recalling now the conversations of the first hours of the war in the forest southwest of Lvov, I understand that at that time the Red Army soldiers and commanders lacked an idea of the scale and nature of the upcoming trials. I do not make an exception for myself, although without prejudice I will say that I didn't laugh at the tankman. Now it is already difficult to separate the thoughts and feelings of those years from those that were born later. I could assume that the war might last 6 months or a year, but I had no doubt that the battles from the border zone would soon transfer to the territories of neighboring states, and then to Germany itself. Colonel Vasiliev and Regiment Commissar Nemtsev were absent from our meeting. The order for their division was radioed and sent in a package with a messenger on an armored car. Apart from that, I had to confirm it verbally. To avoid any surprises, we duplicated the connection. At the same time, I was going to make a march with their division. My Gaz M1 and the headquarters armored car raced along the broken country road. But enemy aircraft kept all communications under surveillance. We were soon noticed and pursued. The ride turned into a crazy race. And then, for the first time that morning, I saw our I-16 fighter, but it was too painful to watch how this one and only I-16 selflessly rushed at 10, 12 German fighters. And literally in a moment, leaving a tail of flame and smoke, it collapsed to the ground. Where was our aviation? Why was it inactive? Muzichenko said the day before that military equipment was being replaced in the air regiment based in Lvov. Old planes were handed over, yet only 15 new ones were received for practice purposes. Were other air regiments in the same position? An hour and a half later, when I read the message to Nemtsov, it became somewhat clearer to me. As you can see, many aircraft pieces were destroyed at the airfields. Moreover, those airfields were often built in the immediate vicinity of the border. People from our corps also took part in that. Friends, this episode has come to an end. Write in the comments if you are interested in the topic itself, as well as in the changes made to the format. When at the end of the video, I briefly touch particularly interesting points in the book that are not directly related to the main topic of the video, which in turn reveals the memories of the veteran himself in more detail. In addition, I would like to traditionally thank all those who provide assistance to the channel, largely thanks to whom these videos are released. But that's all. Thank you all for watching, good luck, and see you next time.